So, our first presenter is the head chef of Polyscience. He's responsible for creating the vast majority of their cooking content. He's someone who's able to explain the products in great depth from multiple perspectives and package it in a way that's beautiful, inspirational, and educational. He's an expert mixologist, self proclaimed tiki file, and is, as Mike wanted me to say, the perennial contender for Sous Vide Magazine's sexiest chef alive. Please help me welcome the always amazing Chef David Pietranczyk.
Thank you, buddy. That was a glowing introduction that I couldn't have asked for a better one. So hey everybody, thank you for joining me this morning. Today we're going to do a sous vide and HACCP basics presentation, and there is a lot here. I told the guys I'm actually keeping myself on track here. I got a timer going. There is a lot here. We've got about we should be hopefully hitting about a slide per minute. Some of this is going to be about half of it's going to be about sous vide, half of it's going to be about HACCP basics. We're not going to go too deep, but we're going to touch on some important information, and we are going to haul through it. So if you guys have questions, drop them in the comments. The guys will prompt me if it's something that we need to capture in the moment, or we'll answer them after the demo or after the presentation. I'm also happy to answer anything via email. Jason or Mike, guys can drop my Polyscience email in the chat as well. So I'm happy to answer anything over email, or we may even do a follow-up exploring sous vide show if there's that much to talk about. So with that said, we're going to get right into it. So share the window. Perfect. Everybody can see the presentation. Looks like it. Fantastic. Okay, so sous vide and HACCP basics brought to you by me. So what is sous vide? Sous vide literally means under vacuum. It's a precise temperature controlled cooking method in which food is sealed in a non-reactive pouch, heated in a water bath at gentle temperatures until the desired degree of doneness is achieved. Now, while sous vide translates to under vacuum, the vacuum is not critical to the method. You can cook in plastic wrap, you can cook in glass jars, and we'll talk about that later. What's important to understand is that it's a precise temperature controlled cooking method. There's typically humidity or direct immersion involved and the food is separated from that water. Why do people cook sous vide? Consistent, repeatable, and predictable results. It's the same every single time. It's the same Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's the same no matter who's working and who's not, and there's predictable results. You can literally calculate how long it will take your food to cook. You can cook multiple foods in a bath depending on what temperature you're using, what the food product is, and you can streamline your mise en place so you know exactly how long your prep day takes to cook. And as a chef, that's very valuable because the hardest part of the day, at least for me, is always prep. And being able to say, I've got to do this, and that, and this is how I'm going to bang it out. So being able to exactly calculate how long food takes to cook is invaluable in my opinion. Some other sous vide benefits. It increases yield up to 30% by reducing loss from excessive heat. You're not putting a steak directly over a hot grill for 10, 12 minutes or whatever it is, and getting a lot of shrinkage and loss that way. You're simply cooking at a gentle temperature and then introducing to very high heat just momentarily, so you have an increased yield. You can make secondary cuts of meat as tender as more expensive cuts. If you haven't cooked the chuck steak, please do it. Jason is the master of chuck steaks. He can tell you all about them. But it's a beautiful steak that you can serve for 2-3 people and make a ton of margin on it. And it tastes absolutely delicious. It allows for food to be prepared in advance. How far in advance? We'll talk about that later. Complements other cooking methods. If you cook your chicken sous vide before, let's say, frying it for fried chicken, your 12 to 15 minute pickup is going to take you 4 to 7 minutes because you only need to heat the product through and crisp the exterior. It's already fully cooked, potentially pasteurized as well. Should be pasteurized. So it complements other cooking methods, retains nutrients and vibrant colors. After you blanch carrots in a blanch pot, the water is orange. You've lost beta carotene. You've lost nutrients to that water. With sous vide, it's all contained in the bag. Produces moist, tender textures, provides excellent portion control, provides perfect portion control, I should say, requires minimal training, and significantly reduces ticket times. I was working at a restaurant called Boca, which is next door to Alinea. If you're familiar, they've won best restaurant in the United States. They're on like they're on the 50 best list in the high tens. I was working next door. And they had a really bad night one night, really bad night. All of our kitchen and the Alinea kitchen, we used to eat family meal at the same time. So we'd see each other in the alley and we'd just talk and whatever. And they had a really bad night where Grant sent everybody home except the sous chef team. And it was because service was just going super, super slow. So the next day, he calls everybody into the dining room before prep and makes them sit in silence for 5 minutes and then asks them how long they were sitting there in silence. People were saying like 10 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes. It was only 5 minutes, but that means it feels so much longer. When you're sitting at a table in a restaurant, your food's not coming, it's the worst. It feels like an eternity. So this significantly reduces ticket times and provides an overall better guest experience. Okay, so how do you cook sous vide? You need temperature control, circulation, water, and vacuum packaging. Okay, temperature control, 1 degree can make the difference between perfect doneness and over or undercooked, or pasteurized and not pasteurized. Circulation. We use pumps in all of our products because circulation is critical. I like to use the analogy: if you're in a bathtub and your feet are by the faucet, your feet are warm but your butt's cold. So what do? You move your arms around and the whole tub is the same temperature. I hear from people a lot of time, oh, I put my duck breasts in my steam well and I cook them for 8 minutes, which is way too short, no matter what temperature that is. I cook them for 8 minutes and they come out perfectly. First of all, no, it doesn't. And second of all, that is not a repeatable way to achieve a result. And third of all, you're going to have your hot spot where the heat is coming from, and then it will vary throughout from bottom to top, and it'll also vary depending on if there's product stacked on top of product stacked on top of product. So circulation is critical to the method. Water conducts heat much more efficiently than steam or air, providing optimal temperature control. Now, you can cook sous vide. You can cook with precise temperatures, pretty accurate temperatures, in a combi oven, but they are 50 to 70% less efficient than when cooking sous vide. So full immersion trumps all. And I'll give you an example. If you're familiar with, let's say, making waffles at home or pancakes or something like that, there are only so many that you can make at a time, right? So you turn on your oven to a low temperature, as low as it'll go, 200, 250, whatever it is. And you can put your pancakes, your waffles, whatever it is, in the oven to keep them warm. You can do that with your bare hands, and the oven's at 200, 250 degrees. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, right? You cannot stick your hand in boiling water, right? Water is much more efficient at transferring heat than air, or a combination of steam and water and air. Vacuum packaging. The sous vide method relies heavily on wrapping food in non-reactive plastic pouches, but that is solely to keep the food from the water. The vacuum is not critical. It's really just a method to take the shape of the food and separate the food from the water. Proper equipment. So you need an immersion circulator. Circulation is critical. We talked about that. Make sure it's approved for commercial use. And look right on the back. It will say household use approved only, or CUL approved, commercial UL approved, or it will say commercial use approved. Check your equipment. You can and will get fined if you're using household equipment in your restaurant and somebody finds out about it. Vacuum sealer. To ensure the longevity of a vacuum sealer in a restaurant environment, it should have an oil-based pump system. Now, you can purchase pumps that have a dry piston pump, but know that when you vacuum pack foods, moisture evaporates off of the food, and that moisture has to go somewhere. It goes into the pump and settles into the bottom of the pump, and eventually it's going to rust it out. The benefit is you don't have to pay for oil or take the time to change the oil. But the trade-off is at some point that cost is going to come back to you in the form of a repair on the dry piston pump. So it's really just a matter of, do you want to change oil? Do you not want to change oil? Are you, is it better for you to have costs along the way or an upfront cost? So you just kind of have to weigh that out for yourself. But an oil-based pump system is going to get you a better result, and they're going to last a lot longer. A data logger. So to ensure specific core temps have been reached, local health departments may require the use of temperature data loggers. And as part of your HACCP plan, they're going to ask you to log all those temperatures, and that can easily be accomplished with the PolyScience Hydro Pro Plus. I would be fired if I didn't have at least one product plug in the entire demonstration, but I do believe that is the only one. In the fall, we released 2 new Sous Vide appliances. They are our newest and best. The Hydro Pro Plus being the one that has a data logging functionality built right into it, and it's $100 more than the Hydro Pro. So for that price, it's a steal, because a data logger, a good data logger, and a hypodermic probe that we trust and recommend is going to fetch somewhere between $200 and $300 more. So really, it's a tremendous value with the Hydro Pro Plus. So sure I didn't skip one there. All right, so we're going to go into the steps of sous vide. We do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this. Okay. The first step of sous vide is prep. So you would prep your food pretty much just like any other foods. Trimming and portioning, as with any other cooking method, make sure to clean, trim, and portion large ingredients as close to their final size before cooking. So people say like, oh, I will sous vide my entire beef tenderloin and then I cut it into steaks. Don't do that. Sous vide cooking times are based on thickness, and a tenderloin is, let's say, at its most 3 inches in diameter, but a fillet may only be 1.5 inches in thickness. So that will cook much, much faster, exponentially faster than an entire tenderloin. You want to cook as long as you have to, but as short as you need to. Okay, so trim and portion as close to the final size before cooking. Brining and curing. Dry cure or brine your fish at a 10% brine for 10 minutes for fatty fish and 5% at 10 minutes for lean fish. Does anybody want to take a guess why? Drop it in the comments. But I am about to tell you the answer. So for fatty fish, the salt takes longer it's harder for the salt to transmit through the fat than it is to transmit through water. So we use a higher concentration brine at the same amount of time. For pork and poultry, we use a 1.75 equilibrium brine overnight. And if you inject that brine into the pork or poultry, it must be pasteurized to the core during the sous vide cooking process, because you have now pushed surface bacteria to the core. Pre-searing. Pre-searing rapidly pasteurizes the surface and begins to develop mired flavored and aromas. Chill until the core temperature reaches 3.3 C before vacuum sealing. I believe this is the first temperature we've come across. I operate in Celsius because I do trainings all around the world, and the rest of the world uses Celsius except for us. And in this day and age, there are plenty of tools to easily calculate calculate from Celsius to Fahrenheit. I use one on my phone called F Converter, and it's fantastic. So 3.3 C before vacuum sealing. Okay, packaging. So we prepared the food. Now it's going to go into a bag, a jar, or plastic wrap. So vacuum bags. This is the most desirable method for sous vide because it's efficient. You can package a lot of food quickly, and it perfectly conforms to the shape of the food. Make sure, however, that they're made of a blend of low and high density polyethylene and polypropylene. Make sure that you purchase bags that say they are boilable. Not all vacuum bags are temperature stable. Some are meant just for packaging. So make sure that the bags that you buy say that they are boilable. Typically, they're going to be called a 3 ml boilable bag. I guess second shameless product plug, if you go to polyscienceculinary.com, we have extremely aggressive pricing on all of our vacuum bags. And unlike anybody else who offers them in counts of 1,000 or 2,000, we have them in quantities of 250. So it's much more absorbable, much lower cost, and you can buy mix and match different sizes. We have 3 different sizes: pint, quart, and gallon. So check those out. Plastic wrap. If you're doing something like a torchon or like anything like a torchon or a sphere, maybe you want to do a mousseline sphere or something like that, or a cylinder, you can use plastic wrap. Make sure it does not have PVC in it. It will say on the box typically if it does contain PVC. So just check for that. Something to be aware of. PVC being polyvinyl chloride. Glass. Canning jars are great for sous vide. You can cook creme brulee, chicken liver pâtés. You can make yogurt. You can pickle in them. You can infuse alcohol in them. Glass jars are great for sous vide. However, be aware that cook times are a bit longer because the heat transfer through the rigid shape rather than a vacuum bag that will help convect the heat through the bag by moving with the circulation of the pump. That will help transmit the heat through the bag. Glass doesn't do that, so it will take longer. Cook. So now we've prepared the food, we put it in something, now we're going to cook it. All right, so let's talk about cooking methods. We break cooking methods down into 3 different cooking methods. There are low temperature cooking. This is the OG of sous vide cooking. I set the bath to the temperature that I want to achieve in the core of my product, and I drop it in. Yay, cooking sous vide. This is a good method, but it is not a great method. Okay, so this is where we set the bath to where we want to finish or just above. We have plenty of information on Delta cooking available on our blog, and if you just bump your bath 2 degrees Celsius over where you want to finish, you'll shave off about 1/3 of your cook time, which is pretty tremendous, especially as food thickness increases. Time increases exponentially. So we always recommend bumping at least 2C over your final core. Multiple temperature cooking, okay? This is a method of cooking used when you want to have control over both texture and the doneness of the food. It's also useful for pasteurizing the surface of foods that have not been pre-seared. Okay, so we would take 2 baths. Let's say one is set to 85 degrees Celsius. We would dunk it in there for, let's say, 5 minutes and then move it to a core temperature bath. This will create textural contrast from the exterior to the core, but then we moved it in that core temperature bath to control the end degree of doneness. So we're controlling texture and doneness. We're also pasteurizing surface bacteria in that method. Now with steaks, let's say we champion pre-searing those. Maybe we wouldn't use a multi-temperature approach in that case, so we would just use the low temperature approach, and we would just set the bath 2 degrees over core because we've already pasteurized the surface with our pre-sear step. Now, high temperature cooking approach. This one's a little bit wild. Maybe you've never seen this one before. This is where we set the bath way higher than where we want to finish. So let's say our bath is set at 85C, and we want to finish at, let's say, 60C. So we'll actually pull the food at like 40 or 45C and let it carry over. And it'll sometimes reach 60, sometimes it won't. This is more of a traditional style result where we have overcooked, less overcooked, perfect in near the middle, and then maybe a little undercooked in the middle. Okay, but this is a result that, say, someone who's not familiar to that extreme uniformity and texture and doneness from edge to edge. The first time people see sous vide foods, remember your own experience, you thought maybe it's a little undercooked. And that's not because you probably weren't used to having that uniformity throughout the product initially. Okay, so this high temperature cooking approach kind of replicates that bullseye of doneness. Cooking by core temp. Okay, I have a slide later on FDA food recommendations. This is not that. Okay, these are temperatures that we recommend for a good food result. We cook eggs anywhere between 60 and 64C or 70 for 1 hour or 75C for 15 minutes. Fish anywhere between 52 and 58. Poultry and pork 63 to 74. Beef anywhere between 52 and 68. Vegetables, 83 to 85, or 90C if they're green vegetables. And then fruit anywhere from 78 to 84. Let's talk about the why on this. And this is actually why I started working in Celsius to begin with, is that, first of all, a scale from 0 to 100 makes sense. Fahrenheit does not. And once you start to grab that, it really does make a lot more sense. And let's hone in on beef. I use the scale 45 is blue, 50 is rare, 55 is mid-rare, 60 is medium, 65 is mid-well, and 70 is well done. Now, we trim that scale. So we said, okay, 45 is blue, 50 is rare. And we said 70, so 50 rare and 70 well done. Well, 52 is actually the baseline for killing the vegetative forms of pathogenic bacteria that we're concerned with. So we trim that side of the scale to 52, which is why you also see our lowest other common temperature, fish, we trim it to 52. And then 68, that is the temperature at which actin and myosin, which are two enzymes, proteins. Well, that is the temperature at which actin and myosin denature. And when that happens, the cell structure cannot hold water anymore. So 70 being well done, we've surpassed that 68-degree mark, and that's why well done foods are dry. So we trim the scale to 68 for well done. 85 degrees, I hope you guys can see my cursor. 85, that is where pectin denatures. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in best bets, but that's why we trimmed the scale there, because pectin denatures at 85. Sous vide toolbox. So how do you figure out how long food takes to cook? Well, as far as we're concerned, there are two ways to do it. You can look it up, use a time and temperature reference, and built directly into the PolyScience Hydro Pro is Sous Vide Toolbox. It calculates the thermal conductivity of proteins. There's categories for shellfish, fish, poultry. There's a foie gras setting, beef, game. There's all sorts of categories in there. We also have in the new Sous Vide Toolbox, which is in Hydro Pro Plus, fruits, custard, legumes, grains, all sorts of food types in there. You tell it the size, shape, thickness, and other factors relating to its thermal conductivity. You simply just press the selections to answer the questions that it gives you, and then it yields a predictable result. The Sous Vide Toolbox was developed by Breville's own Dr. Douglas Baldwin in determining, he's the foremost mind in determining the thermal death curves of E. coli, Listeria, and Salmonella. It's a great predictor of cooking time, but the health department requires logging of true core temperature. So if you are under the scope of HACCP, they're going to say, that's great, but we need to see your core temperature, and you need to cook to this core temperature. Not a problem. PolyScience has that solved. Let's talk about probe cooking. So hypodermic probing. Let's go back here. So you see here this little, let me move my own window out of the way. You see this little nugget right here. This is our hypodermic probe from the Hydro Pro Plus. Plugs right into the back of it. It has an automatic calibration feature where you can calibrate it once per year or more often if you like or are required to. And each probe remembers its own offset. If you were to calibrate a standard setup of a K-type probe and a data meter, what you would really be doing is offsetting the meter, and then you'd have, based on the inherent inaccuracy of the probe. And then if you grab a new probe and pair it with that, now you've really screwed the pooch because you were offset for the previous probe and not the one you're using. Our probes actually remember their own offset so that you can use any probe with any Hydro Pro Plus, and you're going to be 100% accurate. Now, the probe goes through this little orange foam tape here. This is high density closed cell foam tape. This is what keeps the vacuum in the pouch while you cook to take the core temperature. So again, foam tape, it is high density closed cell foam tape. We sell this through our website, polyscienceculinary.com. A little bit, a sample piece comes with the Hydro Pro Plus. The hypodermic probe also comes with Hydro Pro Plus. This goes through the bag and monitors the core temperature of the food as it's cooked. But now we recommend that you would discard that that piece of food because you've pushed surface bacteria to the core by pushing the needle through it, so that food should be either pasteurized to the core or that piece discarded rather than served. If you're me, you eat it. Step 4, finishing. So we've prepared the food, we've packaged the food, we put it in something, we've selected a cooking temperature, we've cooked it, we've logged it. Now what do we do with it? We're going to finish it. So food that has been sous vide is totally ready to eat right out of the bag. However, for a traditional result and refreshing that exterior, you're probably going to want to sear it after the fact. So we recommend pre-searing in many cases, and then post-searing. Retherming. Not all foods need to have been cooked sous vide to be rethermed in a sous vide bath. Foods that will easily scorch or dehydrate while being held warm, such as purees, sauces, soups, condiments, they can be vacuum sealed and held warm for service. And this is something I don't think people take enough advantage of. When I do tasting menu type stuff, or I know exactly when something is going to be served in a given evening. So that day, I will take my sauces, I will take my purees, transfer them from deli containers to vacuum pouches, put them in a bath at 85°C, and just keep them floating hot. Pour it into a saucepan when we're ready to serve that course. Boom, it goes out and it's done. I don't even have to think about it. It's just holding warm perfectly. And there's no fear of scorching, over reducing, or anything like that. Now let's talk about cook and serve or cook and chill. So foods that have not been prepared for immediate service should be chilled thoroughly and rethermed for optimal texture and food safety. So if you're not cooking and serving, if you're not cooking and finishing it, you should cook and chill it, which brings us to our next step, chilling. So let's talk about step chilling. We credit Creo with this, and Dave Arnold, if you're not familiar with him, back in the day, it was called French Culinary Institute. Dave Arnold was the chef. And I forget the rest of his background, but he was, I don't know if he actually was a scientist, but he coined the term the full gousseau. So Korea champions doing all of those steps and then chilling down the food, step chilling the food, and then reheating it. And in a double-blind taste test, he said, sorry guys. He said, we don't actually know what this is doing for the food because we know that there is no actual reabsorption of liquid through this step chilling process, but people seem to prefer this overall. So step chilling of proteins. Eggs and vegetables can, I just should say of foods. Eggs and vegetables can go directly into the ice bath. And now let's say we have small, medium, and small, medium, and large pieces. Fish, 5 minutes in an ambient air temperature rest. You can take the food, just put it on a cooling rack. 5 minutes, cool water. Then you take it and you move it to the coolest water that will come out of your tap, and then go into an ice bath for 2 hours. Okay, so then we get progressively larger from, let's say, a fish fillet to, let's say, a New York strip to maybe a pork belly to a beef roast or tenderloin. Okay. So we do 5, 10, 15, 20. So progressively in size from air to cool water to ice bath. And that's how we step chill our foods. Let's talk about best bets. These are best bets to get you an excellent food result. Best bets for eggs. So placing eggs in a bag with some of the water will help contain any breaks. Now, you don't have to vacuum seal this. You can simply take your eggs, put them in a vacuum bag, take a ladle, and ladle some of the water into the bag, and then clip that to the side of your bath. This way, any eggs that bounce around or another egg drops on top of another egg, you're not going to have egg drop soup in your circulator. Not necessary, but it's a good pro tip. Eggs can often be pulled as quickly as 45 minutes. A standard chicken egg can be pulled as quickly as 45 minutes. But an hour ensures you're going to have perfection at the yolk has reached equilibrium with the bath in most cases. Eggs can be held for up to 2 hours without a loss of quality. And it's interesting because they don't change temperature. If you have an egg sitting in a 62-degree bath, it will never get hotter than 62. But the yolks continue to change and they get a little fudgy in texture the longer that you hold them. So We wouldn't recommend holding an egg for service any longer than 2 hours. So if you have a 4-hour service, make sure you stagger those eggs. Drop the bath temperatures to C after 1 hour, after the first hour of cooking. So up to 2 hours after that. If eggs are cooked in advance and then chilled, which is totally cool, return them to C below your cooking temperature. You're going to be good to go. Best bets for vegetables. Hydrolysis of pectin occurs at 85 C. That'll yield a tender result in 45 minutes, but you could go over 85, or you won't go over 85, but staying at 85 too long could denature the pectin enough that you have an overcooked texture. 84 C yields a perfect result every time. 83 for 3 hours is perfect for artichokes. Love it. But other foods may develop sort of a canned flavor and texture. Cooking that low at 83 is just not my preference for vegetables. Green vegetables, we cook them at 90 C for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on their thickness. Essentially, we're blanching them in a bag. Cruciferous vegetables, ones that are stinky, should be removed from the bag immediately after they're fully chilled, because that stinky nature will kind of sort of proliferate as they're in the bag, and they'll kind of take on a kind of a nasty taste. So let's say, you've done Brussels sprouts. As soon as they're chilled, get them out of the bag. Transfer them to a deli container or whatever other method for storage. Blind seasoning for vegetables. Got 1,000 grams of vegetables. Season them with 5 grams of salt. Hit them with oil. Toss. Bag them up. They're ready to go. Best bets for fish. Halfway point. Thank you, Mike. Fatty fish. Brine at 100 grams of salt per 1,000 grams of water for 10 minutes. That's the 10% brine. Brine 50 grams of salt per 1,000 grams of water for lean fish for 10 minutes. That's at 5% brine. Or we dry cure. So you season the heck out of the fish so that it is completely snowed over in salt. For fatty fish, 7 minutes, or lean fish for 4 minutes, because again, it's harder for the salt to transmit through the fat than it is through the water. And this is something I practice at home. After that, we rinse it. We rinse the cure off, pat it dry, and then vacuum package them. Brining or curing helps to season the fish, firm the texture, denature surface albumin, and kill some surface bacteria. Fish is often best cooked multi-temp because fish that's cooked in a low temperature method typically has a very uniform texture, and it's not as texturally pleasing when you've got that contrast from the exterior to the core, in my opinion. And also that scalding step will help to firm the texture and kill some surface bacteria. Placing, and this is what I just said, placing in the fish in a scalding bath pasteurizes the surface and it firms the exterior to give that textural contrast. Use a good amount in the fat in the bag to help this fish swim in the bag. It'll avoid that edge, that line that develops around the fish, or stamping. If you've got a lemon peel in there some time, it gives that a place to go so that it's not stamped into the food. And then you have a fossil of time on the underside of your salmon. Best bets for proteins. Pork and poultry benefit from an overnight equilibrium brine, 1.75% salt to the weight of the meat and water. Red meat is often not brined for textural reasons. Nobody likes pastrami filet mignon. Pre-searing helps to set the structure of the meat. If you take a chicken breast and pre-sear it and then chill it and then vacuum package it, it will look like a chicken breast instead of an envelope when it comes out of the sous vide cooking process. So this kind of sets the exterior structure of the meat. It begins building the Maillard flavors and aromas, and it pasteurizes the surface of bacteria. If pre-searing, you must keep the core below 25 C and then rest it for 5 minutes before chilling to 3.3 C or below before vacuuming. The food has to be cold before vacuuming, because otherwise the moisture in the food will literally begin to boil under vacuum because you're dropping the atmospheric pressure. The moisture in the food will literally begin to boil and explode the cell structure, and it will not be able to retain moisture. You'll have a cottony, dry texture food. This is one of the biggest mistakes that people make in sous vide cooking is that they vacuum food that is not thoroughly chilled, and the water is allowed to boil as they're vacuum packaging it. This is why so many people say, I don't like the texture of sous vide foods, because they've destroyed it. And they didn't know that. Season after pre-searing for a better sear. And if you're not pre-searing, it's advisable to use that scalding bath at 85°C for 5 minutes before moving to a core temperature bath. This is my favorite part of the presentation. So this was actually taken from a demo that I did for the ACF conference, the American Chefs Federation. I did this training for the ACF conference in Orlando, Florida. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a Disney freak through and through. And we were in Orlando, so I was in the spirit. You will see several Disney references throughout this part of the presentation. So if you're wondering why there's Dumbo on this slide, that's why. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, HACCP. But before we get started, let's get one thing out of the way. There is no one-size-fits-all HACCP plan. You cannot simply buy a HACCP plan. You cannot purchase a ready-made HACCP plan and say, here's my HACCP plan. HACCP is a consultation between you, your team, and your health department, and then figuring out how you're going to handle food, keep your customers safe, how you're going to cook the food, and so on, and here what rules you'll adhere to. Okay, there is no one-size-fits-all HACCP plan. It is different for every establishment. So what is HACCP? HACCP isn't an acronym for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. It's a food safety system that combines elements of food microbiology, quality control, and that's one of the biggest ones, risk assessment, in order to decrease the risk of foodborne illness. Why do you need HACCP? Well, different combinations of heat treatment, cooking, salt concentration, sugar concentration, pH, intrinsic antimicrobial and antibotulinal properties of food, and the cold chain, which is something we're going to talk a lot about in the next half of this presentation, all affect various foods differently. Let's talk about the big two nasties, botulism and listeria. This is an excerpt from the safety evaluation of sous vide processed products with respect to non-proteolytic Clostridium botulinum by use of challenge studies and predictive microbiological models. I'm going to break this down line by line for you guys. This was done by the National Center of Biotechnology Information. Concerns associated with sous vide processing involve the microbiological safety of the products. So psychotropic foodborne pathogens, particularly non-proteolytic group 2 Clostridium botulinum bacteria, are of particular concern due to the methods of preparing, distributing, and storing these products. What does that mean? Non-proteolytic group 2 Clostridium botulinum is a primary concern in sous vide cooking because of the method of preparing, serving, and storing the sous vide food products. Let's continue. Mild heat treatments in combination with vacuum packaging may actually select for C. botulinum and increase the potential for botulism. Let's talk about that. Mild heat treatments may actually select for C. botulinum and increase the potential for botulism. How does that happen? Well, throughout the cooking process, you also kill off beneficial bacteria. And now you have a food that potentially has botulism, that may be infected with botulism, and now you've killed off beneficial bacteria in a vacuum packaged environment. Sous vide products are generally formulated with little or no preservatives and frequently do not possess any intrinsic inhibitory barriers, pH, water activity, or sodium content that either alone or in combination would inhibit growth. Therefore, strict adherence to refrigerated store temperatures below 3.3 C must be maintained to ensure the safety of sous vide products with respect to non-proteolytic C. botulinum. Refrigerated storage below 3.3 C, critical. However, temperature control and chill chains is often inadequate. Temperature abuse is common throughout distribution and retail markets and by consumers. 3.3 C, hard to maintain if you're not keeping an eye on it and don't have the proper equipment to do it. So what was the result of this study? They say, the result of the present study indicates that the safety of sous vide products with respect to non-proteolytic C. botulism. We're going to talk about proteolytic and non-proteolytic C. botulinum in a moment. But the safety of sous vide products with respect to non-proteolytic C. botulism has to be evaluated product by product. And an increase in processing time and temperature would seem to be a logical solution in view of the difference of the p-values observed between high-risk and safe products. However, the degree of benefit gained from increased thermal processing, higher cooking temperatures, longer cooking times, is obviously greatly dependent on the type of product. Additionally, the adverse effects on sensory and nutritional qualities by increased thermal processing are the opposite of the original idea of sous vide processing. Yeah, you could cook at a higher temperature for longer, but it's going to give you a worse nutritional result, and the organoleptic qualities of the food also go down, which kind of the opposite of what we're trying to achieve with sous vide cooking. But there's good news. With all of that gloom and doom, there's good news. According to the Food Authority of New South Wales, Australia, as far as can be determined from scientific literature and food-borne illness databases, sous vide chefs have been successful in managing food safety, and food poisoning attributed to sous vide has not been identified. That's good news, right? So let's talk about C. botulinum. Proteolytic and non-proteolytic. Proteolytic cannot grow at temperatures below 12 C. Non-proteolytic strains can grow as low as 3 C, albeit slowly, and the rate depends on other many inhibitory factors: salt, pH content, sugar, water activity, etc. Proteolytic strains produce odors, gases, and therefore they're detectable. Non-proteolytic strains are largely undetectable because they do not produce these signals. With proteolytic, you're going to know something's going on. Non-proteolytic, you would never know it was there, which is, again, one of the reasons that it's so of such concern, because you will not know that it is there. Let's talk about spores and toxins. Okay, with C. botulinum, Clostridium botulinum bacteria produce spores that are inert. They're inert. They don't do anything. They become active or regenerate after being heat damaged. When you cook them, you wake them up. And they can reproduce toxin again if the conditions are right. So if you've heat damaged them, they can produce the toxin again if the conditions are right. Protein source, anaerobic environment, low acid, low salt, low sugar, ambient temperature, sous vide conditions. Okay, sous vide conditions is the perfect environment for them to produce spores. To kill the spore itself, it must undergo conditions of at least 250 Fahrenheit for at least 3 minutes. You're never going to reach 250 degrees Fahrenheit in a sous vide bath. However, if it is on the surface of the product, pre-searing it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 minutes per side, that is going to kill the spores on the surface of the food. The only way to avoid germination of the spores is to maintain a temperature of 0 to 3 C during shelf life. Toxins. This is what gets you. The spores, not what gets you. The toxin that they produce, BTX, botulinum toxin, is a neurotoxic protein produced by Clostridium botulinum. 1 microgram is lethal to humans when inhaled. BTX is destroyed by heat treatments of 85 C for longer than 5 minutes or 80 C for longer than 10 minutes. This is why we scald the foods in that high temperature bath before we cook them or we pre-sear them to either kill the spores, any potential spores, and then also destroy the toxins. Okay, this is why we always recommend pre-searing or pre-scalding. Okay, I hope it's starting to make sense. L-monocytogenes. I probably pronounced that wrong, but that's how I say it. Cause listeriosis, causes fever, nausea, diarrhea, body aches, headaches, and more severe cases can affect the brain and nervous system. It can cause meningitis and death. Pretty scary. Controlling it. It can be killed by cooking and cannot survive in temperatures below 1 C. So freezing foods, it will extend shelf life. Cook foods to at least 62.8 C for 3 minutes for whole meat, 71.1 for ground, 73.9 for poultry. Raw veg before eating. Keep uncooked and cooked foods separate. Avoid raw milk products and wash in hands, cooking utensils, and surfaces. That's easy enough, right? As far as FDA cooking and labeling goes, these are the temperatures and times that they want you to hit. They don't care that you hit a specific core temperature and then hold for longer for pasteurization. The FDA does not recognize that. They want you to hit these temperatures. So if you are under the scope of FDA guidelines and HACCP plan, and someone's holding you to that, this is all they care about, and that's what they want to see. Labeling, you should label the bag with what's in it, when it was packaged, storage temperature, and the use by date. Now we're going to talk more about storage and use by right now. Cooling. The FDA, and again, you're all going to get a copy of this after the fact, and you can easily get yourself an app that will give you these temperatures. They will not surprise you when you convert them to Fahrenheit. 57.2 to 21.1 in 2 hours, 21.1 to 5C in 4 hours, and then from 5C to 1.1 within 48, and then held at 1.1C is how they want you to cool sous vide foods. Cold storage. Now, this varies by state and FDA food code that they've adopted, but roughly 30 days from the date of packaging if it's cooled and held at 1.1C. So that would be held in a extremely heavily iced water bath in your cooler is how you achieve that temperature. Must be consumed or discarded within 72 hours after removing from 1.1. So if it's in your walk-in or your reach-in at 1.1, and then you put it in your low boy, you've now removed it from that cold storage and put it into new cold storage. You've got 72 hours. Now, if you haven't stored at 1.1C, you've only stored at 3.3C, you get 72 hours from the date of packaging. Not the date of cooking, the date of packaging. Or indefinite shelf life if you freeze it. All right, so now we're going to talk about vocabulary. Before we begin to explore the 7 principles of HACCP, the ins and outs of a HACCP plan, and our SOPs, we all need to speak the same language. So, hazard, a biological, physical, or chemical property that may cause food to be unsafe for human consumption. Salmonella is an example of a biological hazard. Critical control point, an operational step in a food preparation process which control can be applied and is essential to prevent or eliminate a hazard or reduce it to an acceptable level. Heat treatment, cooking. Critical limit. Critical limits can be measured. So it's one or more prescribed parameters. There may be one or more critical limits that you can do at a CCP to effectively control the hazard. A critical limit is measurable, 155 for 15 seconds, a specific temperature for an amount of time. Operational step is an activity in the flow of food. The flow of food is the way that your food moves through your operation, receiving, packaging, cooling, cooking. Corrective action is an action to be taken when the results of monitoring show that control at a CCP has been lost. If food falls below 135, it will be reheated to 165 for 15 seconds. Corrective actions need to be recorded. Monitoring. The act of observing and measuring to make sure that critical limits are being met and maintained. Sous chef will check product temperature and ensure its appropriate core temperatures before vacuum packaging. Verification activity. Ensuring that monitoring and other functions of a HACCP plan are properly being implemented. This verification is making sure that everything is working as it should. The manager reviews temperatures and procedures daily. Did I go forward? No, I did not. Monitoring. The act of observing and measuring to make sure that critical limits are being met and maintained. The sous chef will check. I think I already did that one. Verification activity. Ensuring that monitoring. Sorry, guys. I had those twice. Record keeping. Documentation of monitoring and verification activities. Typically, your records from your monitoring and verification are required to be on site and readily accessible for 1 year. So people who have a HACCP plan, they will keep a HACCP binder, and they will keep all of those temperature logs, all the temperature information for 1 year. HydroPro Plus stores all of the cooking data on board for 1 year and cannot be erased from the appliance. So no matter what, you will not lose that data. And you can easily, with one push, transfer all of the logs to an email, airdrop them, text message them, whatever you want to do with them. With the PolyScience HACCP Manager app, comes free with the HydroPro Plus, and it is an easy way to maintain your records on the cooking and cooling side of sous vide. Process flow, the flow of food through your process from receiving and continuing through service. So from the moment the food is received to the moment it is served, that is your process flow. The SOP, standard operating procedure. It's a written method controlling a practice in accordance with a predetermined specification to obtain a desired outcome. This is how we wash our hands. This is how we receive product. This is how food is vacuum packaged. This is our standard operating procedures. Okay. Last but not least, the 7 principles of HACCP. Hazard analysis, critical control points, critical limits, monitoring, corrective actions, verification, and record keeping. You will be able to know this song. You will be able to sing this song anytime if you have a HACCP plan. Hazard analysis, critical control points, critical limits, monitoring, corrective actions, verification, record keeping. It all happens in this flow. First, we analyze hazards. What hazards exist at an operational step? Some of them are handled through SOPs, but what hazards exist? What are those critical control points? Working through your process flow, you identify operational steps where you can apply control. Cooking, receiving, cold holding. Critical limits are measurable. Chicken has a critical limit of 165 for 15 seconds. Monitoring. Line cook takes the temperature of finished chicken with a calibrated thermometer to ensure that a critical limit has been reached. Corrective action. Continue to cook chicken until critical limit is met. Verification activity. Manager will review temperature logs and procedures daily. Record keeping. All logs of temperatures and corrective actions will be kept for 1 year. So just as we went through our vocabulary, you saw that. These are the examples of those 7 principles of HACCP in action. HACCP plans come in a variety of colors, but the ingredients are all the same, okay? Now we're going to talk about the bits and pieces, and I know we're coming up on the end here, which is awesome because we are right on time. HACCP plans are specific to your establishment, but you're all going to be required to do and have the same nuts and bolts to your plan. You're going to have assessment information. This is the list of foods and ingredients involved in your cooking process. You define the process, define the equipment, and your facility information. Our sous vide carrots contain carrots, thyme, oil, salt. Define the process. They are received, they go into cold storage, they come out, they're prepared, they get vacuum packaged at this temperature, they get cooked, they get chilled this way, they go into cold storage, so on and so forth. We define the process. Throughout that process, it goes through a stainless steel table, a melamine cutting board, a knife, 3 mil boilable bag. You define all of the equipment and utensils that are used in preparing that food. And then it was done in this facility at this address by this person, facility information. Then we have the hazard analysis worksheet. This is where you define your potential hazards, biological, chemical, and physical on your hazard analysis worksheet. Your process flow. From receiving through serving, this is how food flows through my establishment. It comes through the door, goes into cold storage, comes out, gets prepped, gets vacuum sealed, goes back into cold storage. At 1.1 C is moved to a low boy at 3.3 C for service, is then heated to X temperature for service, goes to the customer. That's my process flow. And then HACCP worksheet, the process flow, identify the 7 principles of HACCP on your HACCP worksheet. Your SOP documentation. Some hazards are not controlled by CCPs. Norovirus, as an example, is managed by hygiene and hand washing. So my SOP for hygiene and hand washing controls norovirus. Other examples would be how to calibrate a thermometer, how to receive the product, how employees will be trained. Logs. Logging everything that's part of monitoring likely revolves around temperature and conditions of product. Your receiving log will have conditions of the packaging. Milk came in, one of the cartons was damaged and it was discarded. Fish came in, was received at this temperature. All the fish appeared to have, clear, beautiful eyes, red gills, and this and that. It was okay. and we accepted it, put it in a cooler at 1.1 C. And then your waiver. Certain municipalities may ask for a waiver or variance to be submitted for an SOP special process, and that waiver must be maintained in your HACCP documentation. So, good luck with your HACCP plans. I know that was a lot. That HACCP can be very confusing, especially the first time you see it. But when you learn your 7 principles of HACCP, you'll start to, all of that vocabulary will click with you. The operational steps, the critical limits, critical control points, all of that will be much more easy to understand, and you'll go through a HACCP plan with breeze. So if you want to know more about HACCP, you need help with your HACCP plan. CREA is the first and foremost people that you guys should reach out to. They do assistance and consulting with HACCP plans. And I highly recommend getting yourself a HydroPro Plus for assistance with your temperature data logging for your cooking and cooling processes. So that is the end. There is no more. That is the end of my presentation. I'll hand it over to Jason and Mike for the last, I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes that I reserve for answering questions.
Well, we will definitely get some questions in until Mike tells us that we have to drop out. So he will yell at me in the side. Great presentation. I assume at some point when you teach things, I will stop learning new stuff, but that's it's been like 5 or 6 years, and that has not been the case so far. I always learn new stuff, and I love that. Sheldon asked, how do you find it works for caterers to do a one-time event with a one-time menu option?
Sous vide cooking? Or what? Say that again, or like rephrase that question?
Probably like the HACCP plan. Like, how does that work for caterers that might do like one-off events, or have something on menu for a one-time thing?
That's a great question. I think AJ would have a better answer for that, but I would say that the HACCP plan would pertain to the method. Your HACCP plan would just continue to serving the product, and your process flow would just continue. Your process flow would just continue that after it goes offsite. It's goes into cold storage, goes to this place at this location, so on and so forth, is held at this in this temperature, and this way is reheated for this, and then is served at this in this temperature. So it's just a continuation. So your process flow doesn't stop with your establishment. It's continued to that point of service. Nice. I think that answers the question.
I think so. Anthony said, can you please expand on how combis are, X% less efficient than circulators?
Well, this goes back to my example of waffle and pancake making. Okay, so we're just going to talk about dry air just for a moment. Douglas Baldwin, I actually had a great conversation with him about this, and he has a better answer than I do. But as it pertains to this, just say air alone, just warm air alone. Let's say you're making pancakes, you're making waffles, you keep them in a 200-degree oven while you make all of them, right? When they're done, they go into the oven. You can put them in there with your bare hand. You can stick your hand directly into 200-degree air temperature, and you're okay. Feels like a warm, sunny day. If you stick your hand into boiling water at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it will burn you, right? So water is much more efficient transfer of heat energy than air alone. Now, as it pertains to steam, it's unless it's pressurized, it's a combination of steam, of water and air. So it's not full immersion. It is less efficient because it's not full immersion. So it's quick, but it's not as quick as full immersion. I did a foot race. I was in Florida. I don't remember where, but I was in Florida. I know that much. And I was doing a sous vide demo, and we did a side-by-side cook with a Rational combi oven, set the sous vide mode or whatever it is. I don't use Rational, so sorry, I don't really know what was going on there, but someone else set it up for us, and we cooked a lamb rack. We cut it in 2, and then we cooked half of it in the Rational, and we cooked half of it in full immersion sous vide, and we finished in half as fast. Finished 50% quicker. We finished in half the time that the combi oven finished, and that's because it's not full immersion. So you can absolutely get a great result in a combi oven, but you are not reaching the temperature as quickly as you would in full immersion.
Cool, makes sense. Buddy was in a great panel discussion 2 talks from now. Just said he just purchased his Hydro Pro Plus, so he's excited. What's a good contact email for people to reach you if they have more questions about stuff? Heidi wanted to know that you were going to post that in.
Yep, I will type it in the chat right now because I have 13 letters in my last name. So we'll go ahead and just type that for everybody. polyscienceculinary.com. Let's make sure I spelled it right. I realized this morning that I had spelled my own last name wrong on my first slide.
Nice.
There we go.
George wanted to know, is the Hydro Pro Plus NSF?
Yes, it is. It is NSF. It is waterproof. It is stainless steel from the waist down and from the neck up. It is Gorilla Glass Victus. It can be dropped from 8 feet high and still be waterproof. This thing is a beast. So it's completely designed with commercial use in mind. It is CUL approved. It is NSF approved. It is built like a tank, 100% commercial. Great product.
Awesome. Trying to find some more. Mike wanted to know, do you need proper clear ice for the chilling of the product?
No, would actually not recommend clear ice because that produces slow chilling and slow chilling of the water. We want to push as much heat shedding as possible. So just your regular ice from your ice machine is great. If you got pebble ice, that works fantastic. If you've just got draft ice, that's totally fine. But if you got pebble ice, use it. Heavily ice your baths. When you think you've got enough ice in there, do more. And keep those foods vacuum sealed in a not just an ice bath, but an ice and water mixture that's heavily iced to maintain that 1.1 Celsius.
Perfect. There's a few more questions in the comments. Shauna had a very good one that I tried to answer. You can go back. We don't want to, upset AJ by running long. So we will drop out of this. But if you want to go back and make sure my answer to her was right, and there's a lot of other good questions in there that I'm sure are a little more technical than the knowledge that I have. Chef, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your support, both personally and from PolyScience. You all make great machines, and I love the educational nature of all of your content. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.
If all of you like that presentation, please give Dave some love in the comments. He always does a great job. And I don't know, he knows more about sous vide than pretty much anyone that I have ever met, which is, I've met a lot of sous vide cooks, and he is right up there at the top.